After 37 years of anticipation, speculation, and of course fake leaks, Pokemon Sword and Shield have finally been revealed to the world. And for better or worse, it looks like it's going to stick to the same formula as the first 7 generations. But whether you think this is unimaginative or tried and true, I don't think there's any denying that formulaic's the way to go for the 8th generation. Why is that, you ask? Well, put your YouTube pants on, make yourself comfortable, change your YouTube password because I do have access to it, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, the 5-time WCW champion Cameron, to tell you why the 8th generation of Pokemon should be formulaic. For the record, just because I'm pointing out that Sword and Shield are formulaic doesn't mean that I'm not excited as hell for these games, because as long as the Let's Go mechanics remain a separate thing and the traditional gameplay lives on in the 8th generation, then I'm a happy full-grown boy. Don't get me wrong, I really liked Pokemon Let's Go, but they're not the same as any of the Pokemon games that came before it, regardless of the numerous Poke-employees stressing that they're core entries to the series. I mean, it's weird for them to say that and then constantly refer to the 8th generation as the next mainline games in a way that comes off as them trying to ensure that Let's Go is a separate thing. If you ask my fat ass, I think that's just the Pokemon Company's way of playing both sides. That way, traditional Pokemon fans won't ignore Let's Go out of protest, while casual fans or newcomers won't see them as lesser games, which I think's a smart approach all things considered. Regardless of how you want to label Pokemon Let's Go, though. I'm not denying their core games, because Ishihara said they are, so who am I to say that they're not? But I do consider them to be Pokemon's equivalent to Zelda's Four Swords games. The bottom line is that they're definitely not the same thing as the other games, even if they're still fun. And because Sword and Shield made it clear they're not incorporating any of Let's Go's mechanics, they were able to get away with looking like they could run on the GameCube. And that's also why I don't think anyone cares that it's probably going to be the exact same thing as the first 7 generations. But when I say the 8th generation is going to be the exact same thing as the first 7, I don't mean to imply Pokemon never does anything new at all. There have always been new additions like Mega Evolutions, Alola forms, and of course new Pokemon. And I'm sure Sword and Shield's going to add something new along the same lines. But Pokemon's foundation's always been the exact same thing. You start off in a small town, choose a grass, water, or fire-type starter Pokemon, somehow take down an evil terrorist organization who never thinks to gang up on you, battle 8 gym leaders in the Elite Four, and then finally beat your rival in the finals to become the regional champion, followed by some post-game quests. And more often than not, your father's nowhere to be seen because he doesn't love you and would rather just donate all of his money to charity. But that part's just the game trying to be realistic.
Oh shit, hell is full of dads.
Sun and Moon did try getting cheeky by pretending island challenges were somehow different than gyms, but then Ultra Sun and Moon came out and told everyone it was just a joke, and immediately went back to gyms. And aside from that one change to the foundation of the series, Pokemon's maintained the status quo to the point where it's kinda like the Scooby-Doo of gaming. You know, except it's actually good. Personally, I'd love it if the game's main goal was drastically different someday, but more than anything, I just wish we had difficulty options. Cause even with the experience share turned off, playing through the main game could feel kinda brain dead sometimes. You could try Nuzlocke challenges, but I wish the game didn't make me even think of that. I don't really have a problem with the gym formula per se, but it'd be nice if the gym leaders had actual AI. I mean, bosses and other RPGs use strategies, so I don't think it's out of the question. And for the love of Arceus, if there's ever a higher difficulty, it'd be awesome if they'd ban items from battle. I know people freaked out when Pokemon Let's Go changed things, but even though there were a few changes I actually liked, those games changed things too much.
I have a
Catching system.
alright? It works just fine.
Despite the fact that I do want change in mainline Pokemon games, though, I completely understand why Game Freak doesn't want to rock the boat too hard. After all, like my neighbor Terry always says, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I certainly wouldn't call the Pokemon series broken. It's made billions and billions of dollars doing the exact same thing for years now, whereas other lucrative gaming franchises tried changing just for the hell of it only to lose popularity. And again, it's not like Pokemon games haven't been changing anything. The foundation is always the same, and like I mentioned earlier, there are surface changes like Mega Evolutions and all that, but then there's that secret world the game barely tells you about, with things like hidden abilities, EV training, and IV breeding that much fewer people know about. Admittedly, I'm a little out of touch with all that, and ironically enough, the reason for that's because it changes way too much for me every generation. So the mainline Pokemon series does a much better job at finding the balance between stagnancy and progress than people give it credit for. But even though I eventually want something different for the Foundation, I wasn't expecting the 8th generation to try anything outside of the status quo. But even though I eventually want something different, I wasn't expecting the 8th generation to try anything outside of the status quo, and I don't think it should have either, because thanks to the paranoia created by Let's Go being labeled as core entries, any drastic changes to the 8th generation would have caused longtime fans to duke all over the place. If nothing else, the Sword and Shield trailer was intentionally as basic and status quo as possible, and I think that was the best possible thing that could have been done. I'm sure there's going to be some changes to the extent I mentioned earlier, but now's not a good time to show that off. Because all fans need to know right now is that the games are going to be traditional, because even the underwhelming starters and graphics won't disappoint as long as hardcore fans finally get that confirmation that Let's Go is going to be its own separate thing. And even if Sword and Shield keeps new mechanics to a minimum, Pokemon would still be nowhere near as stagnant as all these other sports games that come out every year that are essentially just roster updates. But even if it was that stagnant, the Pokemon Company and Nintendo are still a business. I mean, Pokemon games have always been the best-selling non-pack-in title on any Nintendo handheld in history. Well, besides Tetris, but that was a pack-in with a 7-year head start, and even then it was still pretty close. So with a franchise as successful as Pokemon, why wouldn't there be new games as often as possible? When the Switch was out for almost a year with Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild selling out the ass, Ultra Sun and Moon had the audacity to come out for the 3DS. Which you'd think would be a terrible idea, because as everybody knows, once the Switch came out, the 3DSs were games were sent after they witnessed a horrible crime. But despite that, these games sold over 7 million copies. And not only have the formulaic games always sold out the ass, but the critical response has always remained positive as well. Plus, even though butt dumplings like me complain about the formulaic nature, most of us still buy every mainline game and enjoy them as well. And even if Sword and Shield are the most by-the-numbers games in the series, I still think its sales are going to do a little bit more to the needle than move it, which is exactly what every console needs for a holiday season. And not only will the games themselves sell, but Switches are going to fly off the shelves as well. And in addition to immediate profits, a console with a high install base means more third-party support, and it's because of franchises like Pokemon that I think the Switch is going to be able to compete with the PS5 and Xbox for a good while, regardless of the graphical limitations. I mean, just look at how mainline Pokemon games have always helped Nintendo's weaker handhelds compete with home consoles in the past. And as if the standard Pokemon formula wasn't guaranteed to be a heavy hitter on its own, just imagine how much more successful it's going to be after the Let's Go tease made longtime fans more antsy for the real deal. Not to mention the newer fans that those games might have brought to the series. So now more than ever is the perfect time for Pokemon to just stick to the plan and make everyone happy. And speaking of making everyone happy, two people that make me very happy are today's patrons of the day, Tim Ford and Frank Riley. If you want to join these badasses, then consider supporting this channel on Patreon for loot boxes and silly rewards in the mail, or check out our merch store for things that have been scientifically proven by my neighbor Terry to land you a hot date. And if you send us pictures or videos of you rocking the merch, then we'll put it in our videos like these badasses right here. What do you think about the Pokemon formula though? Do you want the mainline series to try new things? Or would you not have it any other way? Either way, let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'll pin whatever I find most entertaining or intriguing. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to prove to the world how big of a badass you are. And if you like and share this video, it really goes a long way to help this channel grow. My name's Cameron, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.